Looking live at the Kremlin, that's the center of the Russian government, where officials are talking retaliation this morning.
Yeah, this comes after President Obama announced new sanctions against Russia, payback for the alleged hacking of our presidential election. ABC's Mary Bruce is at the White House with the latest on this story. Mary, good morning to you.
Good morning. That's right. An eye for an eye. Russia is promising to fight back, set to expel dozens of American diplomats after the U.S. did the same. President Obama has given 35 Russian diplomats until noon on Sunday to leave the country and hit Moscow with tough sanctions. The president saying every American should be alarmed by Russia's cyber attacks and harassment of U.S. officials. It's an unprecedented strike. The White House punishing Russia in part for interfering in the U.S. election. President Obama taking executive action, expelling 35 Russian diplomats, giving them and their families just 72 hours to get out, and shutting down 2 Russian compounds. A 45-acre estate on the Maryland shore bought by the Russians in 1973, and this Long Island mansion, a beachfront manor once owned by an oil executive, bought by the Russians in the 50s. In Moscow, 2 leading intelligence agencies slapped with sanctions, 4 top officials too, including the head of military intelligence. The U.S. also targeting 2 notorious cyber criminals wanted by the FBI, one accused of stealing $100 million. Not on the list, the Russian president, even though President Obama has strongly suggested Putin was aware of the attacks.
Not much happens in Russia without Vladimir Putin.
And there's also retaliation we don't know about. No details on any covert cyber attacks, but the president promising the actions announced are not the sum total of our response. Russia is blasting the measures, a Kremlin spokesman calling them unpredictable and aggressive. And they're accusing the White House of trying to undercut the incoming Trump administration. The president-elect suggests the crackdown is misguided, saying in a statement that while he'll meet with intelligence leaders next week, it's time for our country to move on to bigger and better things. Trump has repeatedly questioned whether Russia was behind the hacking.
They have no idea if it's Russia or China or somebody. It could be somebody sitting in a bed someplace.
But the White House says there is no question Russia interfered. The administration releasing new declassified details explaining how Russian groups hacked the Democratic Party, at times tricking officials into handing over their credentials by mimicking their employers' email systems. Now, in just 3 weeks, President Trump could undo these measures, but that could be politically difficult. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle support these tough actions. Now, as for those countermeasures, Russia promises they're coming later today, measures that they say will make U.S. officials feel uncomfortable. Dan and Paula?
Yeah, those sanctions appear to be the one thing that Republicans and Democrats are agreeing on right now. Mary, thank you.
And we begin with the extraordinary exchange between President-elect Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Mr. Trump calling the Russian leader, quote, very smart. Putin surprising the White House, refusing to retaliate for the U.S. expelling 35 Russian operatives, payback for the election-related hacks. Vehicles today seen streaming out of 2 Russian compounds, federal agents on hand. Putin saying he'll wait for the president-elect to take office before making his next move. ABC's Mary Bruce starts us off in Washington.
Russian diplomats tonight are on the move, packing up and shipping out after President Obama shut down 2 Russian compounds. And the clock is ticking for dozens of diplomats and their families who have until noon on Sunday to get out of the country. Russia sending a plane to pick them up.
Have to leave within hours, and it's just not human.
And as the parade of moving vans roll out, President-elect Trump is praising Russian President Putin for his restrained response. Trump calling it a great move. I always knew he was very smart. Tonight, some members of Congress blasting Trump for his response.
I am scared. I am frankly very, very scared that our next president hasn't a clue about what Russia is actually up to.
The Russians had promised to retaliate. The foreign minister this morning calling for a tit-for-tat expulsion of U.S. diplomats from Russia. But then, in stepped President Putin with a shocking 180. There will be no counterpunch. Saying in a statement, we will not create any problems for U.S. diplomats. We will not expel anyone. Instead of an eviction, an invitation. Putin welcoming all children of the U.S. diplomats accredited in Russia to the New Year and Christmas children's show at the Kremlin. Experts say Putin may be playing the long game, hoping a President Trump will be more receptive.
that was staged. It was intended to show that Mr. Putin could be magnanimous, that he could be above it all. But again, the goal of that message was not the Obama White House, it's the incoming administration and Mr. Trump.
The president-elect, who has repeatedly questioned if Russia was behind the hacking, says it's time for our country to move on to bigger and better things.
I think we ought to get on with our lives. I think that computers have complicated lives very greatly.
At one of those Russian compounds today, our Lindsay Janis was there as the punishment came down.
Cars were coming in and out of this property all morning until the U.S. government closed down those gates. Neighbors we've spoken with say the Russians who used this property were quiet and kept to themselves.
Inside those gates, this decadent mansion had become a hub for gathering secret intelligence. On the Maryland shore, a similar lavish retreat, 45 prime acres with a swimming pool and tennis courts. These ornate rooms used for meetings and parties and allegedly for spying. Tonight, both properties now off limits.
And Mary Bruce joins us live from the White House tonight. Mary, with the world watching his every move, President-elect Trump has tweeted again tonight?
That's right, Tom. Amid this growing tension, Donald Trump did send out another tweet, this time criticizing some of the media coverage. The president-elect clearly paying close attention, but still not answering the big remaining question. Will he undo these measures and sanctions once he takes office in just 3 weeks? Tom?
Mary Bruce for us tonight. Mary, thank you.
Welcome to Hannity. Russian President Vladimir Putin is responding to the Obama administration imposing sanctions on his country over allegations of hacking. I'm Kimberly Guilfoyle in tonight for Sean. Putin released a statement earlier today that reads in part, quote, although we have the right to retaliate, we will not resort to irresponsible kitchen diplomacy, but will plan our further steps to restore Russian-U.S. relations based on the policies of the Trump administration. And President-elect Donald Trump is reacting to Putin's statement by tweeting, quote, great move on delay by V. Putin. I always knew he was very smart. Joining me now is former U.S. Ambassador to the UN and Fox News contributor John Bolton. Ambassador, thanks for joining us this evening. Lots of developments even since yesterday when we spoke on this show. Let's get your thoughts.
Well, I think the Putin decision not to expel American diplomats has several aspects to it. Number one, it shows utter contempt for Barack Obama. It's saying to him, you're going to be history in 3 weeks, and I will reserve judgment on what I'm going to do until you're gone. Now, note that he hasn't said he's not going to expel American diplomats. He said he's putting it off. But let's also be clear. This was staged. And remember, this is the land of the Potemkin village. So early in the day, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov goes public with a recommendation to expel 35 American diplomats. Every Western news source in Moscow reports that it means they are going to be expelled. And then Vladimir Putin steps in and says, no, 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 we won't expel 35 diplomats. And what's more, I'm inviting the children of American diplomatic personnel in Moscow to a Eastern Orthodox Christmas party. What a sweetheart. Look, he is trying to maneuver to Russia's advantage, no surprise there. But he's also playing on a mistake I think we talked about last night that Obama made in pushing together both the cyber attack issue on the one hand and the harassment of American personnel in Moscow on the other. And he's trying to build the two of them together to get what I think he really wants. The most important concession he wants is no retaliation for the cyber attack. The sanctions are meaningless. The expulsion of diplomatic personnel is a temporary problem. What he really worries about is America going on cyber offense in retaliation for what he apparently did during the election campaign. So this is still very much in play.
It certainly is, and you bring up such an important point because he definitely doesn't want the focus to be on those cyber attacks. This is a way of sidestepping it. This is a man who's obviously, yes, very bright, KGB. He knows exactly what his mission objectives are. He's very focused on the target, and he'll do whatever it takes to achieve it. And even if that means cultivating this relationship with President-elect Donald Trump, he's going to do that. And as you said, it's very much, showing disrespect for President Obama and his current administration in their last 3 weeks to say that was a joke. You thought you were going to poke the cage of Russia, of Moscow, and it just didn't work.
Right, and I think it shows that they have thought through what's going on here in these last couple of months. They saw what Obama did to Israel and the Security Council resolution. They understand that Obama's in this period of opportunity, really, for him between the election and the transition. You know, I'm not entirely sure that this is Obama just trying to vent his spleen on the incoming Trump administration. I have a feeling that part of this is that, you know, a lot of these steps you can't take in the middle of an election campaign, and our election campaigns now take almost a whole year.
True.
He thought Hillary was going to win.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And so a lot of this stuff was planned because he could do it, he could take the credit, he could take the heat. Hillary was not going to reverse any of it when she took office, so he could get his legacy in place and she would defend it. Now he finds himself faced with Donald Trump being his successor, and all his plans are thrown awry.
No, you're right. I think he made his decision to kind of wait on this and not do anything because it was predicated on a certain outcome of the election that they thought they had guaranteed, that they grossly underestimated the movement by President-elect Donald Trump and the people that came out in droves to support him. But I just wonder also, you know, does this put President-elect Donald Trump in a bad position come January 20th? What is your advice, Ambassador, in terms of what he should do and how to handle Russia?
No, look, I don't think it puts him in a bad position. I think if Barack Obama really thinks he can box the new Trump administration in, he's sadly mistaken.
Correct.
President-elect Trump is going to meet next week with intelligence officials to talk about what the facts are on the allegations of Russian efforts to meddle in the election, and he'll make up his mind accordingly. I just think this is a graceless way for Obama to leave the White House, and virtually everything he did, with the exception of the Security Council resolution or other things he may try to do internationally, can be reversed with the stroke of a pen or the action of Congress. So he may be active in the next 3 weeks, but it's really ultimately not going to have much impact.
All right. Ambassador Bolton, always a pleasure. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Kimberly.
Folks, we gotta get good people to stand up against these people.